And we have one more speaker for this session, and that is Allyson. So Allyson is going to tell us a little bit about analysis of Broadway shows, and I'm very interested in this as well.
I don't know how I'm going to follow Matt. That was very impressive, but I will do my best.
Great.
So give me just a second to pull up my presentation. Okay. Can everyone see that? Okay, perfect. All right, so my project is haMLton. So ML stands for machine learning, a little bit of a play on an acronym there. So gross box office and sentiment analysis of Broadway shows. I'm a data science and applied mathematics double major, and Dr. Lee has been my advisor through this project. So I'm using this for my honors thesis and my data science capstone. So I'm gonna do my best today. I have a lot of work done. I'm going to try to summarize the data science stuff for the non-data science people here and the Broadway stuff for the data science people that are here. So I'll try to do my best to make sure everyone knows what's going on. So why Broadway and what is it? So musical theater is one of my hobbies, and Broadway is something that I've been very interested in for years. I'm very passionate about it. So the term Broadway refers to the live theater performances in the 41 professional 500-seat or more theaters located in NYC's theater district. So the first Broadway theater was built in 1732, so it's been around for basically as long as the United States has been around. In the 2018-2019 Broadway season, Broadway's total attendance was almost 15 million people, with a combined box office gross of almost $2 billion. And then the Tony Awards are televised every year. They're similar to like the Oscars or the Emmys or like any other like award shows for like movies or TV, and they recognize excellence in live Broadway theater each season. So the purpose of my project is to determine how long a show will run on Broadway based on a couple of different features. So what factors contribute to long run times for Broadway shows, and why is it that shows that win the Tony Award, for example, for Best Musical, close, whereas ones that didn't win from the same season continue to run for many, many years. This is especially evident in the Wicked versus Avenue Q. You probably all know Wicked. It's the one with the green girl. She's the Wicked Witch of the West. That show has run for like 12 years at this point, but it did not win Best Musical, but it's one of the highest grossing shows. So that's just sort of some stuff to think about. So a little bit of an intro to my data. One of my data sets I was able to get from the internet. I was able to get it online, and the others I had to create myself because there's not a lot of data sets out there with this information. So the grossing data is from playbill.com, and this has all of the grossing for each Broadway show back to 1985, I believe. And then I sort of crawled through Broadway databases online and made a data set for the Tony Award data for musicals and the Tony Award data for plays. I chose to go back to the year 1997. That is the year that The Lion King came out. The Lion King is the highest grossing show in Broadway history, and it has run since 1997. So that is the year I decided to go back to for all of my Tony data for musicals and plays, as well as my opening night review data. My New York Times opening night review data is also self-created. That I was able to scrape from the New York Times website with a short program. And I'm going to use that to evaluate sentiment analysis, do a little bit of natural language processing to show that if the reviewers didn't like the show, will it close early, things like that. And then my last smallest data set is just Broadway theater latitude and longitudes that I'll use for some visualizations at the end of my project, weren't used in my models. So a closer look at all of my data. So this is my grossing data from Playbill. So this is just a screenshot of the head of the data, the first like 10 entries or so. So every week of the year has several rows for each show that is on Broadway for that week. So for example, you see the Book of Mormon there at the top. The Book of Mormon has run for about 4 or 5 years at this point. So let's say the Tina Turner musical has been running for about a year at this point. That's about midway through. So if a show has been running for a year, it's in this data set 52 times. So every entry in this data set is a show in the particular week of the year with its weekly gross. You can see all of the columns there on the right. The weekly gross for that show, the weekly overall gross for Broadway of that week, the potential gross for that show if all tickets had been sold at the top ticket price, how many seats were sold that week for that show, the percent capacity in the theaters, what theater it was in, stuff like that. So that's the grossing data that I got from the internet. A closer look at my Tony data. So these are in the form of like sparse matrices. So they're encoded that if a show did not win an award in a particular Tony category, a 0 is there. And if it did win the Tony Award in that category, there's a 1. So you'll notice, I don't know if Dr. Hughes is still here, but I know he's a big Hadestown fan. So in the bottom of the top data set, the bottom row, you can see Hadestown, and Hadestown won in 2018-2019 season for Best Musical. You can see it has a 1 in the Best Musical column. It won for Best Original Score. So there's a 1 in that column. It won for Best Featured Actor in a Musical. So there's a 1 in that column. So it won many, many awards last year. So these are all of the Tony categories. There's different categories for plays and musicals. So throughout my entire project, I decided to evaluate plays and musicals separately. Musicals tend to gross more heavily than plays do, and they tend to run for a longer period of time too. So I decided to just completely evaluate them as 2 different entities. So a closer look at my New York Times review data. So I had to crawl through the New York Times website and get reviews for all of the different musicals. I only did this for musicals and not plays. You'll see that my accuracy for plays is already pretty good without looking at reviews. And I also have over 500 plays in my data sets and only about like 280 musicals. So it was quicker for me to find 280 reviews than do, like all 700. So I was able to write a short program to scrape all of the words from these articles into a corpus and then use some sklearn libraries to evaluate the polarity and the subjectivity, which the polarity is the negative or positive of how the review says like the show is, if it's a really positive review or a really negative review, and the subjectivity is just like statements and facts. So this is my latitude and longitude data. I won't go too deep into that. You'll see it here in a little bit at the end of my presentation. So my models for plays. So the models that I used most were decision trees and random forests. They tended to perform the best out of all the models I tried. So I was able to condense down my grossing data so that each individual play was its own vector or entry in the data. So you'll see that 1984, 33 Variations, 45 Seconds from Broadway, all of those shows now are just one entry. So for every music or every play in the data set, it has all of these features that you can see on the left. And some of these I created myself, like the first week gross, the first month gross, the first 3-month gross, the first 6-month gross. All of those are ones that I was able to aggregate and calculate and grab from the original playbill data set. And then I was able to average like the capacities so that how were they filling their theater during their first month in the theater? How were they filling seats during, their first 6 months? The length of the run in weeks. So as I mentioned, every single week it's in the data set is going to add to the length of its run. And then I also have each Tony Award that it was eligible for. So my X data, which is my features, has all of these minus the show name, the theater, the season, and the length of the run, because those are not good prediction columns. And then my Y label, what I'm predicting is, I just called it run. So a little bit of a closer look at that. I sorted each, instead of trying to get my models to accurately predict, every single possible week number of runs, I sorted them into 4 categories. So if a show has a 0 in the run column, that means it did not run for longer than a month. If there's a 1, that means it ran for more than a month, but less than 6 months. If it has a 2, that means it ran for more than 6 months, but less than a year. And if it is encoded with a 3, that means the show ran for more than a year. So my first decision tree for plays with a little bit of fine tuning. Decision trees are relatively simple and they're decision-making diagrams. So you can see my tree there on the left for plays and all of the decisions that are being made. So the final accuracy of that, it was able to predict what category a play would run in by around 91.5%. So decision trees are pretty accurate for classification for sure. And they did really, really well for categorizing my plays. My random forests, so random forests are a little bit different than decision trees. They use a bunch of short, like shallow decision trees, and then they use those to vote at the end. So random forests are typically a little bit more accurate than decision trees. So the accuracy for my decision tree for my random forest for plays was about 94%, which was a little bit higher than just the plain decision tree. And I want to call your attention to these feature importances. So these are the order of the features and how much work they're doing to predict the final outcome. So you can see sort of which features were most important. So models for musicals. My musicals were not as accurately predicted, and I'll sort of go into maybe why towards the end of the presentation. So split sort of the same way as the plays, and you can see that each musical is its own vector in the data set. So I split these into the same type of categories. And my decision tree only got to a 77%, which I wasn't super happy with. So then I tried with a random forest, and unfortunately my random forest was even worse. It was around a 75%. And I don't know about you all, but I'm not super pleased with this accuracy. So I did a little bit extra work into some ensemble learning. I know I'm going a little bit fast, but I want to get to my visualizations at the end. So if you have any questions at the end about what specifically these models are, please feel free to ask. So musicals with bagging. So bagging is short for bootstrap aggregation, and it's used to decrease the variance of the model. So bagging is a parallel method that uses sampling with replacement to essentially get you more data to work with. So with bagging, I was able to get my decision tree to a 73%, which was lower than what it was just with the plain decision tree, but it was able to bump my random forest classifier up to an 80%. So right now I was able to predict how long a musical will run with about 80% accuracy. So I moved on to the voting classifier. So the voting classifier is a classification method that uses multiple other classifiers, and then it has them vote at the end for what label they think belongs to the entry. So with voting classifier using random forest decision tree and support vector machine, I was able to get my final model for musicals up to an 82.21% accuracy. My final results, you can see that plays are much easier for the models to predict how long they'll run, and musicals not so much, but still a B, still a passing grade. And you can see that the features that contributed most to the classification are pretty similar for both. So like first 6-month gross, first 3-month gross, first 6-month capacity, and then total awards was also a big one too. So if a show wins a lot of Tony Awards, it's more likely to run for a longer period of time. So I want to jump over now to my Tableau. So Tableau is a visualization software that I first learned over the summer at Intel during my internship. So can everyone see this? Okay, cool. Okay, so I was able to feed all of my data into this and do some data blending, so it has access to all of my data sets. So this is just grossing trends for musicals. The heavy hitters in the musical categories, you can see I have them labeled, are haMLton, The Lion King, and Wicked. haMLton has done a crazy amount since it came out. As you know, I'm sure you all know haMLton, it's famous at this point. So it is really creeping up in terms of how much gross it has compared to all other shows that have been on Broadway. So I wanted to drop out some of the noise because this is all like 300 musicals. So I'm going to drop out some of this other stuff and just do shows that have ever grossed more than 25 million in a year. So you can see Wicked, The Lion King, and haMLton are still here. The Lion King has the most gross because you can see it's been consistently higher than almost every single other show since it premiered in 1997. So, oh wait. Yes, okay, yes. And then other shows that are down here that are kind of famous, like Les Mis, Miss Saigon is also a big one. The Book of Mormon is also a big one. I know the Carole King musical is in here somewhere. I'm pretty sure Dr. Sanchez and Dr. Thorson are a big fan of the Carole King musical. So moving on to plays, because I know I'm running out of time. So plays, as you can see, do not gross as heavily as musicals. However, unless you are the Harry Potter play or To Kill a Mockingbird, you're doing pretty darn well, especially as plays are getting a little bit more popular. So To Kill a Mockingbird and The Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime were both novels. So I think that's what contributes to their big sales. And of course, Harry Potter is always a big blockbuster, no matter if it's a book, if it's a movie, no matter what it is. So you can see that the Harry Potter musical has grossed a ton in such a short amount of time. So to drop out some of the noise, here are the plays that have grossed over 5 million in a year since 1988. I just want to move on to my tree maps. So this is a little bit better and a neater representation of the total grosses for shows. So the area of these squares represents the total gross of the show in relation to all other shows. So you can see that for musicals, The Lion King is the big hitter, as well as Wicked. The Book of Mormon is right behind that, and haMLton is slowly creeping up, even though it's only been on Broadway for 3 or so years at this point. It's close to being one of the top grossing shows, which is incredible. And then same with plays, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, parts 1 and part 2, it is like 2 separate plays. So technically it's grossing double the amount of what other plays are grossing because it's 2 different shows on 2 different nights. But it's already the top show and it's been running since 2018. So that's pretty incredible. And then to get into a little bit more of like my theater analysis. So this is a map of where all of the Broadway theaters are. The Vivian Beaumont is all the way up here by itself, but all of the rest of the ones are right here in the theater district wrapped around Times Square. This is the center of Times Square, like right here where Broadway intersects with 46th Street. So as you can see, they're shaded by how many musicals that have ever been in this theater. So you can see some of these ones right in the middle of Times Square. Like the Marquee has done a ton of musicals over the last couple of years. They've done 16. So you can see the ones right around Times Square, especially ones that have a lot of seats. Like the Marquee Theater has 1,500 seats. The L'Enfantin Theater has 1,500 seats. A lot of these ones, the Richard Rodgers is in here somewhere, which is where haMLton is. It has 1,300 seats. So you can see that musical theaters are really popular right around Times Square. And I think that's because they're the big blockbusters and they bring in the most money for Broadway. Whereas for plays, you can see the shift to some of these outer theaters, so not the ones directly in Times Square. And you'll notice that the ones that are for plays have a slightly lower seat count too. So for plays, this one has about 1,000. The American Airlines Theater has only 700 seats, but it has done 37 plays in the last 22 years from 1997. So you can see that plays usually play the smaller theaters with about 700 seats instead of about 1,500 seats. And then my final thing that I want to make sure to show is now they're shaded by the total grosses for that show or for that theater. So this one is the darkest. It has the most, it has the highest gross out of all of them. This is where the Lion King is. I think location is really, really important for the Lion King. Obviously it's been running since 1997, so it's going to have a higher gross than most shows, but that theater is one of the 2 that are actually located directly on, like with a Broadway street address. So it is actually on Broadway. It's a big theater. It's got 1,600 seats, and it's had a consistent high grossing show since 1997. This other dark one, the Gershwin Theater, is where Wicked is. So it has grossed, as you can see, about 1.5 million in the last 22 years, and it's got 1,700 seats. So that's also a really, really big theater. So just to sort of show which theaters in relation to the big blockbuster shows they have in them, how much the theaters can gross as well. And then the one where haMLton is, this is the Richard Rodgers Theater. And that one isn't as dark as the Gershwin or the Minskoff yet, but I'm sure it'll get there if haMLton keeps going in the trajectory that it is going. So I can go ahead and cut this off here. I think I'm out of time. So if anyone has any questions, go ahead.
Just quickly, I could ask a ton of questions, because of my obsession with Hadestown, but you mentioned gross, which of course is very important, but I'm wondering, did you look into it all production cost and their
I did
related
not,
things?
and that is something that's like good to like point out, because obviously like Wicked and The Lion King have really, really high production costs because there's a lot of moving sets, a lot of moving pieces, extravagant costumes, things like that. So it is sort of important that shows like Wicked and The Lion King continue to gross high because of the high production costs as well. So that's definitely another layer that I could look into.
Cool.
Great. Other questions for Allyson? Allyson, so I'm curious. Yeah, I think your passion for the topic really shines through. In addition to using all these different tools from data science, I mean, I think it's awesome. So one thing I was curious about was when you identified the different factors that were for musical versus plays. Why do you think goes into that difference? Because I know awards showed up for one, but not for the other. So I was curious if you had some insights as to why those differences might come about.
So this is actually a really interesting topic. Specifically, the show Mamma Mia, we all know Mamma Mia. They just keep making movies with ABBA songs, very, very popular. So Mamma Mia didn't win any Tony Awards. It is one of the highest grossing shows on Broadway. If I can pull that graph back up. Musicals by Tony, no, musicals by length of run. Okay, so you'll notice that Mamma Mia is here at the top. But it hasn't won any Tony Awards. So I think that's what makes it a little bit difficult. So plays aren't as like blockbuster and like widely known. So when they win a lot of Tony Awards, like especially for me, I haven't gone to see a play, but when a play wins like a ton of awards, especially if there's somebody famous in it, like Nathan Lane, I'm like, oh, I should go see that show if it's getting all of these awards. So that's why I think total awards showed up as a higher feature for length of run for plays instead of musicals, because people will continue to go see Mamma Mia even though it hasn't won any Tony Awards. So I think it's sort of like appeal as well, and like demographics, because anyone can like sort of go see The Lion King. Like it interests kids, it interests adults, it interests young adults. So I think plays aren't as widely known, so when they get a lot of awards, it stands out.
Makes sense. Yeah, thank you. And I see one more question there in the chat. So one question that says, did you see any trends between genres of the musicals and plays?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned, demographics is a huge one. So some of especially the shows like I think I can pull it up. The Spider-Man musical from a couple of years ago. I did not go see it. I have no desire to go see a Spider-Man musical, but it was something that girls were able to get their boyfriends to go see, or their husbands or their sons and things like that. So let me go to, so the Spider-Man musical, yes, here it is. It is in the top 20 highest grossing musicals of all time. And I think it just goes with like appeal. So if you can get something that appeals to either all audiences, like something like The Lion King, or you can get something that appeals to sort of an audience that other shows don't appeal to, you can get like a huge turnout, and that helps with grossing and run.
Makes sense. Great, thank you so much. Yeah, great presentation. So yeah, let's give Allyson a hand. All right, folks, so that marks the end of this session. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you to all the speakers and mentors. Yeah, super interesting session. Look forward to the rest of the day. We still have quite a few presentations to go here in SCAD, so I'll give you the opportunity to move on to whatever are the next presentations you want to go to. Otherwise, yeah, if you have follow-up questions for those speakers, I'm sure they would all welcome follow-up questions via email or anything like that. Great. All right, thanks for your attendance, folks. I'll see y'all later.